Ancient Greece, a civilization that flourished millennia ago and yet still impacts us today through its art, architecture, and democratic ideals. But how did this cradle of Western civilization come to be? How did the ancient Greeks go from a small collection of city-states scattered across a mountainous peninsula to a unified empire spanning over 3 continents? What was life like in ancient Greece before Alexander the Great came along? This is ancient Greece in 10 minutes. Let's begin. The earliest inhabitants of Greece were the Minoans, who lived on the island of Crete around 2700 BC. Their society was a Bronze Age civilization known for its advanced palaces and artwork. However, their great palaces were soon destroyed in a volcanic eruption on the neighboring island of Santorini. Who knows how much the Minoans loved their pizzas, but if they were anything like modern Greeks, it was probably a lot. After the destruction of their palaces, the Minoan civilization collapsed by around 1450 BC. The Mycenaean civilization then took over the mainland, the islands of Greece. By 1600 BC, they were an Iron Age culture, named after their capital at Mycenae. They spoke a language known as Mycenaean Greek, which was the ancestor to the language spoken today. The Mycenaeans were also known for their epic warriors, including the legendary Agamemnon. However, by around 1100 BC, the Mycenaean civilization had collapsed due to a combination of internal strife and external invasions, most likely from people known as the Dorians. For the next few centuries, Greece was in what historians call a dark age. Literacy rates plummeted. Artwork became more simplistic, and society as a whole regressed a few centuries. But by 800 BC, Greece would enter a new age of prosperity known as the Archaic period. During this time, Greece started to emerge as a cultural powerhouse. City-states began to take shape, and the first experiments with democracy were taking place in places such as Athens. During this period, Greece also experienced a population boom. As the economy grew and trade expanded, so did the population. People started moving into the countryside, and smaller villages grew into larger towns and cities. One of the defining features of ancient Greece was the large number of independent city-states. A city-state was an independent political entity, consisting of a city and its surrounding countryside. Each city-state was ruled by a monarchy, aristocracy, or in some cases a tyranny. Some of the most powerful city-states included Athens, Sparta, Thebes, and Corinth. These city-states were constantly vying for power and influence over one another. This led to a number of conflicts throughout ancient Greece, including the Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian War. The Persian Wars took place between the years 492 and 449 BC. They were fought between the Greeks and the Achaemenid Empire, also known as the Persian Empire. The wars began when the Persians invaded Greece after the Ionian Greeks revolted against Persian rule. The Greeks were able to defeat the Persians thanks to the leadership of heroes such as Miltiades and Themistocles. The most famous battle of the war was the Battle of Marathon, where a small force of Athenian hoplites defeated a much larger Persian army. The Persian Wars were significant for several reasons. Firstly, they resulted in the expulsion of the Persians from Europe. Secondly, they helped to unify the Greek city-states against a common enemy. And thirdly, they marked the beginning of the classical period in ancient Greece. The classical period in ancient Greece lasted from around 480 to 323 BC. It was a time of great cultural and intellectual flourishing. The arts and literature flourished during this period, and many of the greatest works of ancient Greece were created during this time, such as the Parthenon marbles. The classical period was also a time of great philosophical and scientific thought. Philosophers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle made significant contributions to the fields of philosophy and science. The classical period was also a time of great political and military conflict. The most famous conflict of this period was the Peloponnesian War, which was fought between Athens and Sparta. The war was fought from 431 to 404 BC and resulted in the decline of Athens and the end of the classical period. After the Peloponnesian War, Greece entered into a period known as the Hellenistic period, which lasted from around 323 to 146 BC. During this time, Alexander the Great spread Greek culture throughout his vast empire. This led to the fusion of Greek and Eastern cultures, which resulted in a new cultural period, known as classical art. Alexander's empire would eventually collapse, and Greece would come under the control of the Roman Empire in 146 BC. Now let's talk about daily life in ancient Greece. Life in ancient Greece was very different from our own. The ancient Greeks lived in a world without electricity, running water, or modern conveniences. They were a highly stratified society with a clear hierarchy. At the top of the social hierarchy were the elite class, which consisted of wealthy landowners and merchants. Below them were the middle class, which consisted of artisans, shopkeepers, and farmers. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were the slaves. Slaves were considered property and were used for labor-intensive tasks, such as farming or mining. In ancient Greece, the family was the basic unit of society. The father was the head of the household and had authority over his wife and children. Women in ancient Greece had a subordinate role in society. They were expected to manage the household and raise children. Education was primarily the responsibility of the father and was usually limited to boys. Girls were typically educated at home by their mother. In ancient Greece, religion played a central role in people's lives. The ancient Greeks believed that the gods were all-powerful and that they controlled every aspect of human life. Religion was a part of everyday life, and people would make sacrifices to the gods in order to gain their favor. The economy of ancient Greece was based on agriculture, trade, and slavery. Agriculture was the backbone of the economy, and most people in ancient Greece were farmers. Trade was also important to the economy of ancient Greece, and many merchants traveled throughout the Mediterranean Sea, trading goods. Slavery was also a part of the economy of ancient Greece, and slaves were used for labor-intensive tasks. Now let's talk about daily life for different social classes in ancient Greece. The elite class in ancient Greece enjoyed a life of luxury and privilege. They lived in large houses and had access to the best goods and services. They also had political power and were able to influence government decisions. The middle class in ancient Greece lived a more modest life. They worked as artisans, shopkeepers, or farmers, and had a limited amount of wealth. They were not able to enjoy the same luxuries as the elite class, but they were still able to live a comfortable life. The slaves in ancient Greece had a very difficult life. They were considered property and were forced to work long hours for little or no pay. They were also denied basic rights and freedoms, and were subject to the whims of their masters. Ancient Greece was a fascinating and complex civilization that had a profound impact on the course of human history. From its rich culture and democratic ideals to its powerful city-states and influential philosophers, ancient Greece has left an indelible mark on the world. Whether you are interested in history, philosophy, or simply curious about the world we live in today, there is much to learn from this ancient civilization. So keep exploring the ancient world, and who knows, you may just discover something that changes your perspective on the world around us. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and comment below to let me know what other civilizations you'd like to see in this series. Don't forget to subscribe for more content. See you next time.